man collapses on his morning run. He is 48 years old, healthy, strong, a father of 3. The paramedics arrive. They find no pulse. At the hospital, doctors search for answers. Heart attack, massive, fatal. His wife cannot understand it. He had no history of heart problems. He exercised every day. He took care of himself, but he did take one thing, a small orange pill, for his arthritis. His doctor said it was safe, better than the old drugs, no stomach problems, no risks. The pill was called Vioxx. Between 1999 and 2004, about 20 million Americans took it. Research later estimated that 88,000 of them had heart attacks. 38,000 died. That is more deaths than the entire Vietnam War. But for years, no one connected the dots. Not the doctors, not the patients. Not even the government agency that approved it. The company that made Vioxx knew something was wrong. Documents would later prove it. But they kept selling. They kept advertising. They kept making billions. How did a drug that killed tens of thousands stay on the market for 5 years? Why did the people meant to protect us look the other way? And what does it mean when medicine itself becomes dangerous? This is the story of Vioxx and the system that failed. The year was 1999. America was optimistic. The internet was booming. The economy was strong. And medicine was entering a golden age. For decades, people with arthritis had suffered. The pain never stopped. Old painkillers helped, but they caused bleeding in the stomach. Sometimes that bleeding killed people. Scientists searched for something better. Something that would stop pain without destroying the stomach. They found a new class of drugs. They called them COX-2 inhibitors. The name meant nothing to most people, but the promise meant everything. Pain relief without the bleeding. Safety without the suffering. The company that led this revolution was Merck. For over a century, Merck had been trusted. They made vaccines that saved children. They made antibiotics that cured infections. They worked in Africa for free, fighting river blindness. Their motto was printed on walls throughout their headquarters. Medicine is for the patient, not for profit. People believed that. Doctors believed it. Even competitors respected it. When Merck announced a new drug called Vioxx, the medical world paid attention. The drug promised to ease pain for millions. Arthritis patients, athletes with injuries, anyone who lived with inflammation. The clinical trials looked promising. Vioxx worked. Patients felt better. And the stomach bleeding that plagued older drugs seemed to disappear. In May 1999, the Food and Drug Administration approved Vioxx. The approval process had been fast. The FDA saw the need. Millions of Americans were waiting. Within months, Vioxx became one of the fastest-selling drugs in history. Television commercials showed grandparents playing with children, healthy seniors hiking mountains, active lives restored. The tagline was simple: live without pain. Doctors wrote prescriptions by the thousands. Pharmacies struggled to keep it in stock. Merck's stock price soared. Wall Street celebrated. This was the blockbuster everyone had hoped for. By the end of the first year, 5 million Americans had taken Vioxx. By the second year, the number doubled. By the third year, 20 million prescriptions had been filled. The profits were staggering. Vioxx brought in over $2 billion a year. It became one of the most successful drugs ever launched. But inside Merck, some scientists were worried. The Vigor study was supposed to prove Vioxx was safer than older painkillers. It compared Vioxx to a drug called naproxen. 8,000 patients volunteered. Half got Vioxx, half got naproxen. The goal was to count stomach problems, show that Vioxx caused less bleeding. In October 1999, a safety panel met to review early data. The stomach results looked good. Vioxx seemed safer. The panel was pleased. Then came November, the second meeting. This time, the panel looked at heart problems. The numbers were disturbing. 79 patients taking Vioxx had serious heart problems or had died. Only 41 patients taking naproxen had the same problems. The panel called the numbers disconcerting. They debated what it meant. Some scientists thought it was a warning. Others thought it might be random chance. Merck offered an explanation. Maybe naproxen protected the heart. Maybe Vioxx was just normal, and naproxen made the comparison look bad. Some panel members accepted that explanation, but others did not. The difference was too large. Nearly twice as many heart problems in the Vioxx group. The panel voted to continue the study. No warning went out to doctors, no alert reached the public. The data stayed inside Merck's walls. One scientist at the meeting raised a concern. What if the difference was real? What if Vioxx was causing heart attacks? The response was clear. Keep studying, keep watching, but keep selling. And so they did. The drug stayed on shelves. The commercials kept running. Patients kept taking their pills. No one told them about the 79 patients. No one explained the numbers. The world moved forward as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. A pattern was forming. A pattern that would take 5 more years to fully reveal itself. The question was simple. If a drug might be dangerous, who has the right to know? And who has the duty to tell? The Vigor study ended in the year 2000. Researchers counted the results. They wrote their report, and they prepared to publish. The findings were mixed. Vioxx caused fewer stomach problems. That was clear. Patients had less bleeding, less pain from ulcers. But the heart data was troubling. Patients taking Vioxx had more heart attacks than patients taking naproxen. The difference was significant. Merck decided to publish anyway. They submitted their findings to one of the most respected medical journals in the world, the New England Journal of Medicine. But the paper had a problem. 3 heart attacks in the Vioxx group were missing. The author said those heart attacks happened after a certain date, a cutoff date they had chosen. They said the data did not need to be included. But that cutoff date was strange. It was selected after the trial ended, and it was a month earlier than the cutoff used for stomach problems. This meant the paper showed all the benefits of Vioxx, but it hid some of the risks. Years later, the journal's editor would say they felt deceived. But in the year 2000, the paper was published, and doctors read it as truth. The paper emphasized the stomach safety. It downplayed the heart concerns. It suggested naproxen might be the explanation. Thousands of doctors read the study. Many prescribed even more Vioxx. Their patients seemed to be suffering less. The drug appeared to be working exactly as promised. Meanwhile, the FDA received the complete data. They saw the missing heart attacks. They saw the full numbers. In February 2002, the FDA sent a warning letter to Merck. The letter was direct. It said Merck's advertising campaign was false and misleading because it left out the increased risk of heart attacks found in the Vigor study. But the FDA did not pull the drug. They did not demand a public alert. They sent a letter. That was all. Merck kept selling. The profits kept growing. By 2003, Vioxx sales reached $2.5 billion. Inside the FDA, frustration was building. One scientist was particularly concerned. His name was David Graham. He worked in the Office of Drug Safety. Graham's job was to watch for problems after drugs reached the market. He studied patterns. He looked for signals. He tried to find dangers that clinical trials might miss. Graham started studying Vioxx. He worked with Kaiser Permanente, a health organization in California. They had medical records for over 1 million patients. Graham compared people who took Vioxx to people who took other painkillers. He looked at heart attacks. He looked at sudden cardiac death. The pattern was unmistakable. People taking high doses of Vioxx had more than 3 times the risk of heart attack compared to people not taking painkillers. The drug was clearly linked to heart problems. Graham did the calculations. Based on how many people took Vioxx, he estimated tens of thousands of Americans had already suffered heart attacks because of it. He believed the public needed to know. He tried to publish his research in a medical journal, The Lancet, one of the oldest and most respected journals in the world. But officials at the FDA tried to stop him. They sent emails to the journal. They said Graham's work was not ready. They said it might be wrong. Some FDA officials called Graham's research junk science. They said he was being irresponsible. They pressured him to stay quiet, but Graham refused. He believed the evidence was solid. He believed people were dying, and he believed silence was not an option. Other scientists were noticing problems too. Dr. Eric Topol at the Cleveland Clinic reviewed all the Vioxx data. He found the same pattern: more heart attacks, more strokes, more deaths. In August 2001, Topol published an editorial. He called for Merck to conduct proper studies of Vioxx's heart risks. He said the warning signs were too strong to ignore. Merck responded publicly. They said their drug was safe. They said the benefits outweighed the risks. They said Dr. Topol was being alarmist. But privately documents would later show Merck scientists were worried. Internal emails revealed concerns about heart risks dating back to 1996, 3 years before the drug was even approved. In one email, a Merck scientist discussed whether to allow aspirin use in clinical trials. He wrote that if they forbid aspirin, patients taking Vioxx might have more heart attacks. And that, he said, would kill the drug. The implication was clear. The company knew there was a risk. They discussed it, they worried about it, but they kept moving forward. By 2003, independent researchers had published multiple studies showing heart risks. The evidence was piling up. But Vioxx remained on the market. Doctors kept prescribing, patients kept trusting, the system kept turning. Therefore, David Graham made a decision that would change everything. He would go public. He would testify before Congress. He would force the truth into the open, no matter the cost. In September 2004, Merck was running a new study. It was called APPROVE. The goal was to see if Vioxx could prevent colon polyps from becoming cancer. Thousands of patients had volunteered. They thought they were helping science. They thought the drug was safe. The study was supposed to last 3 years, but something went wrong. On September 23rd, a phone call came from Dartmouth Medical School. The Safety Monitoring Board had reviewed the data. The results were alarming. After 18 months on Vioxx, patients started having more heart attacks than people taking a placebo. The longer they took the drug, the higher the risk climbed. The numbers were undeniable. This was not about comparing Vioxx to another drug. This was Vioxx compared to nothing, and Vioxx was causing harm. Merck's executives faced a choice. They could fight. They could argue the data was flawed. They could claim the patients were already sick, or they could pull the drug. On September 30th, 2004, Merck announced a voluntary worldwide withdrawal of Vioxx. The company said new data showed the drug carried serious cardiovascular risks. The news shocked the medical world. Vioxx had been on the market for 5 years. Millions of people had taken it. Now it was gone. Doctors scrambled to contact patients. Pharmacies pulled bottles from shelves. News anchors reported the story with urgent concern. Families started asking questions. If the drug was dangerous now, had it been dangerous all along? How long had the company known? Lawsuits began immediately. Thousands of them, people who had heart attacks while taking Vioxx, families who had lost someone. They wanted answers. They wanted justice. The lawsuits forced Merck to turn over internal documents, emails, meeting notes, research files. All of it became part of the public record. What emerged was disturbing. The company had known about heart risks for years. As early as November 1996, Merck scientists were discussing the possibility that Vioxx increased heart attack risk. In 1997, scientists debated how to design clinical trials. They worried that if the truth about heart risks came out, it would hurt sales. In 2000, when the Vigor study showed increased heart attacks, the company published a version that left out 3 cases. They chose a cutoff date that made the results look better. In 2001, when the FDA sent a warning letter, Merck continued aggressive marketing. They spent millions on advertising. They trained sales representatives to downplay safety concerns. Internal documents revealed another troubling practice. Merck used ghostwriters. Company employees would draft scientific papers about Vioxx. Then they would find outside doctors to put their names on the papers as authors. In 16 of 20 published papers about Vioxx, a Merck employee was the first author of the initial draft. But on the published versions, an academic researcher was listed as the lead author. One early draft listed the lead author as external author ? The company had written the paper. They just needed a respected name to attach to it. This made the research appear independent. It made doctors trust the findings more. But it was a deception. The FDA came under scrutiny too. Why had they allowed Vioxx to stay on the market? Why had they ignored their own scientists? David Graham finally got his chance to speak. In November 2004, he testified before the Senate Finance Committee. Cameras recorded every word. Graham said the FDA, as currently configured, was incapable of protecting America against another Vioxx. He said the approval and oversight of Vioxx represented one of the single greatest drug safety catastrophes in the history of this country. He estimated that 88,000 to 139,000 Americans had heart attacks or strokes from taking Vioxx. He believed 38,000 to 55,000 of them had died. The senators listened with visible anger. Senator Chuck Grassley said the FDA's relationship with drug companies was too cozy. He said the agency had forgotten its mission. But some FDA officials defended their actions. One said Merck's decision to withdraw Vioxx was proof the system worked. She said the FDA's requirement for long-term studies had revealed the truth. Critics disagreed. They said the FDA had ignored warning signs for years. They said the agency protected the drug industry more than patients. Dr. Eric Topol testified as well. He said the FDA should have required heart safety studies years earlier. He said tens of thousands of heart attacks could have been prevented. Another expert, Dr. Garrett Fitzgerald from the University of Pennsylvania, raised an even bigger concern. He said the heart attack risk was probably a class effect. That meant other similar drugs like Celebrex and Bextra might be dangerous too. If he was right, Vioxx was not an isolated problem. The entire class of COX-2 inhibitors might be flawed. The pharmaceutical industry was in crisis. Patients stopped trusting their doctors. Doctors stopped trusting drug companies. The foundation of modern medicine felt shaky. Merck's stock price collapsed. The company lost billions in market value overnight, but the human cost was far greater. Families grieved. Patients worried whether their heart problems came from Vioxx. Doctors questioned whether they had unknowingly harmed people they tried to help. The system was unraveling, and everyone wanted to know the same thing. How had this been allowed to happen? The lawsuits brought everything into the open. In courtrooms across America, juries heard evidence that had been hidden for years. They heard about the 1996 emails. Scientists at Merck discussing heart attack risks 3 years before the drug was approved. They heard about the Vigor study, how 3 heart attacks disappeared from the published paper, how a convenient cutoff date made the results look better. They heard about ghost-written articles, about sales training that taught representatives to dodge safety questions, about millions spent on marketing while warning signs piled up. In August 2005, a Texas jury returned the first verdict against Merck. They awarded $253 million to the widow of a man who died after taking Vioxx. More verdicts followed. Some juries sided with Merck. They said the patients had other risk factors. They said the heart attacks might have happened anyway. But other juries were convinced. They saw the pattern. They saw the deception. They awarded damages in the tens of millions. In August 2006, a New Jersey jury awarded $47 million to a man who had a heart attack while taking Vioxx. In April 2007, another jury awarded $32 million. The evidence kept emerging. One particularly damaging document showed that Merck had a list. It was called the hit list. The list contained names of doctors who had publicly criticized Vioxx. Internal emails suggested the company wanted to discredit these doctors, to neutralize them, to seek them out and destroy them where they live. Company officials later said the language was taken out of context, but the list was real, and the intention was clear. Silence the critics. Another document revealed what happened to scientists who disagreed with the company. One researcher had found that Vioxx increased heart risk. Merck officials allegedly forced her to remove her name from the study before publication. Even after funding the research, even after agreeing to the study design, Merck publicly discredited her findings when they were published. The message to other researchers was unmistakable. Find the right results or your career could suffer. Juries heard testimony from former Merck sales representatives. They described the pressure to sell, the bonuses tied to prescriptions, the training that taught them to emphasize benefits and minimize risks. One sales representative testified the trainers told them if a doctor asked about heart problems, they should point to the naproxen theory, suggest the other drug protected the heart, not that Vioxx harmed it. Doctors testified too. Some said they felt betrayed. They had trusted Merck. They had trusted the FDA. They had trusted the published research. Now they learned that the research was ghost-written. The safety data was incomplete. The warnings were delayed. Their trust had been used as a weapon against their own patients. Patients and families shared their stories. A 48-year-old runner who collapsed and died. A 55-year-old teacher who had a stroke. A 62-year-old grandfather who survived a heart attack but was never the same. Each story was personal. Each loss was real. Together, they painted a picture of systemic failure. By 2007, Merck faced more than 25,000 lawsuits. The company had spent hundreds of millions on legal defense. Their reputation was shattered. In November 2007, Merck agreed to settle. The company would pay $4.85 billion to resolve the lawsuits. At the time, it was the largest drug settlement in history, but the settlement had strict rules. Only certain cases qualified. Families had to prove their loved one took Vioxx. They had to prove the heart attack happened while on the drug. They had to meet deadlines and file specific paperwork. Many families received compensation, but others did not qualify. The settlement closed the legal chapter, but it did not close the wound, and no one went to jail. No Merck executive was charged with a crime. No FDA official was fired. The system had failed, but no individuals were held criminally accountable. The price was paid in money. But money could not bring back the dead. Money could not restore trust. Money could not guarantee this would never happen again. The truth was finally public. The documents were available. The pattern was undeniable. But the question remained. What good is truth if it comes too late? 20 years have passed since Vioxx was withdrawn. The drug is gone, but the lessons remain. In the immediate aftermath, reforms were promised. The FDA created new requirements for post-market safety studies. They established a safety board independent from the Drug Approval Office. Congress held hearings. They questioned FDA officials. They demanded accountability. Some lawmakers proposed major changes to how drugs are regulated, but many reforms stalled. The pharmaceutical industry pushed back. They said too much regulation would slow innovation. They said patients needed new drugs and delays cost lives. Some changes did happen. The FDA now requires drug companies to track safety data more carefully. They must report problems faster. They must run longer studies. But critics say the core problem remains. The FDA still depends on drug company fees. About half the agency's drug review budget comes from pharmaceutical companies paying for faster approvals. That creates pressure to approve drugs quickly, pressure to maintain good relationships with the companies they regulate, pressure to avoid embarrassing decisions. David Graham still works at the FDA. He has spoken publicly many times since 2004. His message has not changed. The system still has fundamental problems. Another Vioxx is possible. For Merck, the aftermath was expensive but survivable. The $4.85 billion settlement was huge. But Vioxx had earned more than $11 billion during its time on the market. The company remained profitable. No executives lost their jobs over Vioxx. No one faced prison time. The legal battle ended and business continued. Today, Merck is still one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. They make important drugs. They conduct valuable research. They employ thousands of people. But the Vioxx scandal changed how people see the company. The motto about medicine being for patients, not profit, rings hollow for many. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. For the medical community, Vioxx was a wake-up call. Doctors became more skeptical of drug company claims. They started demanding more transparency. They paid closer attention to conflicts of interest. Medical journals changed their policies. They now require authors to disclose financial ties to drug companies. They check more carefully for ghostwriting. They demand access to raw data, not just company summaries. But problems continue. Studies are still funded by companies that profit from positive results. Sales representatives still visit doctors' offices. Marketing budgets still dwarf research budgets for many drugs. The broader pattern persists. In the years after Vioxx, other drug scandals emerged. Opioid painkillers created an addiction epidemic that killed hundreds of thousands. Diabetes drugs were found to increase bladder cancer risk. blood pressure medications were recalled for containing cancer-causing chemicals. Each scandal follows a similar pattern: early warning signs, delayed action, companies prioritizing profit, regulators moving slowly. Patients paying the price. Vioxx was not the first, and it was not the last. It was simply the most dramatic example of a system that sometimes values money more than lives. For the families who lost someone to Vioxx, no settlement could make them whole. No apology could bring back a father, a mother, a spouse. They lived with the knowledge that the death was preventable, that warning signs existed, that people in positions of power made choices that put profits over safety. Some of those families became advocates. They pushed for stronger drug safety laws. They testified before Congress. They shared their stories to warn others. Their work led to some reforms. But they know the system still has flaws. They know patients still trust pills that may not be safe. They know the pressure to sell will always conflict with the duty to protect. The story of Vioxx teaches several lessons. First, that even trusted institutions can fail. Merck was respected. The FDA was established to protect people. But both made terrible mistakes. Second, that warning signs matter. The 1996 emails, the Vigor study results, David Graham's research. The truth was there, but it was ignored or hidden. Third, the transparency saves lives. If the full heart attack data had been published in 2000, if warnings had gone out to doctors, thousands of deaths might have been prevented. Fourth, that money creates pressure. Vioxx made billions. Those billions created incentives to keep selling, to downplay risks, to fight rather than admit mistakes. And fifth, the trust is fragile. The relationship between patients and doctors, between doctors and drug companies, between citizens and regulators. Vioxx damaged all of those relationships. Some trust has been rebuilt, but skepticism remains. Patients question whether their drugs are truly safe. They wonder what risks they are not being told about. That skepticism can be healthy. It can protect people. But it can also be harmful if it leads people to avoid helpful medicines or believe conspiracy theories. The balance is delicate. We need strong pharmaceutical companies to develop new treatments. We need efficient regulators who can approve safe drugs quickly. We need doctors who trust the science. And we need patients who feel confident taking their medicine. Vioxx showed us what happens when that balance breaks. When one part of the system fails, everyone suffers. The question is whether we learned the lesson, whether the reforms were enough, whether we will catch the next Vioxx before it kills tens of thousands. David Graham believes we have not learned enough. He says the pressure to approve drugs is still too strong. He says the FDA still cannot adequately protect the public. Others are more optimistic. They point to the reforms, to the increased transparency, to the growing skepticism that makes it harder to hide problems. But everyone agrees on one thing. The system is only as good as the people running it, and people are human. They make mistakes. They feel pressure. They sometimes choose wrong. Vioxx cannot be undone. The deaths cannot be reversed. The families cannot get back what they lost. But the story can be told. The lessons can be remembered. And maybe, just maybe, the next time warning signs appear, someone will have the courage to act before it is too late. Because in the end, medicine is about trust. Patients trust doctors, doctors trust research. Everyone trusts that the system exists to help, not harm. Vioxx broke that trust. 20 years later, we're still trying to repair it. The work continues. The questions remain. And the small orange pill that promised to ease pain serves as a reminder of how much damage can be done when profit matters more than people. That is the legacy of Vioxx. Not just the deaths, not just the lawsuits, but the lesson that truth matters, that transparency saves lives, that trust, once broken, requires decades to rebuild. Medicine is powerful. It can heal. It can also harm. The difference comes down to honesty, to courage, to choosing people over profit even when that choice is expensive. Vioxx taught us that lesson. The question is whether we will remember it.